So you think that a tea this dark would be quite strong, have a lot of caffeine in it, and be a great replacement for coffee if what you're after is that caffeine hit. This couldn't be further from the truth. So we've kicked off our first issue of the Tea Discovery Club with a banger. It's an interesting tea, an experimental tea that really piqued our interest when we first came across it. And here it is, Jinghua Xiangyuan. So this big hunk of tea here started out life as an oolong tea, a fosho or Buddhist palm oolong tea from southern Fujian to be exact. A tea just like this one here. So this is an example of a southern Fujian Buddhist palm oolong. And here we have the fermented version. So for this tea, the steps to making it is actually pretty similar to how other heicha or other dark teas get made, except that at the beginning, they took the sort of Buddhist palm tea leaves and then made them into an oolong tea first. So all the steps that they would use to make a perfectly serviceable Buddhist palm oolong tea, they did all that, and then what they ended up with, obviously, is like sort of Buddhist palm oolong tea. They then took those finished tea leaves and then added that sort of fermentation process. So how they do that is they take those finished tea leaves, pile them, wet them, then cover them and let it ferment over a few weeks, and then they end up with this kind of fermented, kind of dark tea or heicha. That fermentation process is the same process that they go through in making, sort of ripe pu'er and other styles of dark teas. The resultant tea leaves are then pressed into cakes or bricks and stored in a warehouse or in an environment where the coveted golden flowers can then begin to cultivate and grow inside these tea bricks. Now, these golden flowers may look a little sketchy, but they're nothing to be afraid of. So they're actually a probiotic called Uroshium cristatum, and according to some studies can actually help lower blood cholesterol and blood lipids, promote a healthy gut, and have anti-obesity properties in them. And these golden flowers are actually quite prized and are what connoisseurs of dark teas, for example drinkers of Fu Zhuan Dark teas from Hunan, they look for these golden flowers, because of these purported health benefits when they're choosing or buying their dark teas. Now, I'm not saying dark teas such as Fu Zhuan or perhaps this, fermented oolong would have, kind of magical weight loss or slimming properties to it. I still think diet and exercise is probably your best bet there. But what I'm saying is it's because of these health benefits, that people, when they're looking for or buying dark teas, such as Fu Zhuan, they look for these golden flowers. And also, not sure whether it's due to the general fermentation process or because of these probiotic golden flowers in particular, but dark teas such as Fu Zhuan that have an abundance of these golden flowers, they're said to also have lower levels of catechins, caffeines, and amino acids when compared to other styles of tea. So tea is a funny thing in that darker doesn't necessarily mean stronger or more caffeinated. And what heicha or dark teas lose in terms of its bioactive compounds, in terms of lower levels of catechins, amino acids, and caffeine when compared to other styles of tea, it gains in those other purported health benefits, such as helping to regulate blood cholesterol, blood lipids, and also other potential anti-obesity properties. And it was these purported additional health benefits that led the team at Zhongcha Xiamen to wonder, so Fu Zhuan and other styles of heicha, when making these types of teas, they don't typically use the high grades of leaves, in the production of that style of tea. The focus is usually on how can they, grow and cultivate those golden flowers. But what if we used a higher grade of leaf, say, for example, from an oolong tea? Could we find a way to be able to combine the sweetness and aroma that you would typically find in a good quality oolong tea, but with the additional health benefits that you get from these golden flowers found in, say a Fu Zhuan or, a dark tea. But let me back up a sec and explain briefly who Zhongcha are. They are a trading company officially called the CNNP, the China National Native Produce and Animal Byproducts Import and Export Company. Try saying that fast 3 times. They were the original and state-run enterprise that managed all of the major tea factories in China. And while most of these tea factories were privatized in the 80s and 90s, CNNP still sell their own brand of teas under the label jonga, and they have branches or divisions across different provinces that specialize in different styles of tea. Zhongcha Xiamen is one of 3 branches or divisions that specialize in oolong tea. They also have a division in Hunan that specializes in dark teas, in particular Fu Zhuan Dark teas, and their divisions and branches in Yunnan would specialize in pu'er teas. So anyway, back to the team at Zhongcha Xiamen and their little experiment. So it did take them a while to kind of figure out the exact parameters to be able to ferment an oolong tea. Basically, historically, fermenting other types of tea leaves other than what they use for ripe pu'ers or other kind of hei cha, it typically doesn't work, or typically they can't stably reproduce it, let alone have those golden flowers be able to sort of grow and cultivate. And so it did take the R&D team at Zhongcha Xiamen a few years to be able to figure out the right parameters to be able to produce a fermented style of oolong at any kind of scale. But they did it, they finally figured it out. And so here we have it, a fermented Buddhist palm, Jinhua Xiangyuan. So the name Jinhua Xiangyuan literally translates to golden flower Buddhist palm. Jinhua meaning golden flowers, and Xiangyuan is another name for the Buddhist palm oolong tea. So in any case, with the first issue of the Tea Discovery Club, we did include a pack of Buddhist palm oolong tea so that members can kind of compare and see what happens when we essentially take the same type of leaf but produce them in 2 completely different ways. Do any of the flavors and characteristics of the oolong tea make it and survive through the fermentation process? Let's find out. Okay, so the Buddhist palm oolong, straight off the bat, it's quite sweet, it's quite aromatic, a little bit of a heavier, in this particular one anyway, there's a bit of a heavier roast than what I've tasted in a lot of other southern Fujian style oolongs, especially with like lighter, greener styles of Tie Guan Yin. There's a nice subtle kind of aroma to it as well. It's like a nice subtle floral kind of aroma. So it is quite aromatic, but it's not as aromatic as say like a Danchong oolong tea. So quite light, but also sweet, kind of nashi pear-like flavor, this nashi pear-like freshness to it, but also mixed with like a light toasted grain, and there's no bitterness, at least not with this particular infusion here. So very, at least so far, very, very easy tea to drink. So the R&D team at Zhongcha Xiamen, they trialed a bunch of different oolong teas in order to get this fermented oolong to work, and they settled on the Fosho or Buddhist palm cultivar because it was the one that retained most of its inherent antioxidant properties once it was fermented and processed into a dark tea. So let's see how many, if any, of these flavors or characteristics of the oolong tea, let's see how many of it translates over to the dark side. Yeah, so despite what anyone might say, this is most definitely not an oolong tea. It's fermented oolong, whatever, I guess it depends on how you define it. In terms of the flavor, taste, the appearance, it most certainly looks, feels, and tastes like a hei cha or a dark tea. It's It's earthy, it's kind of rich, warming, earthy. There's a slight kind of woodiness to it. But yeah, I mean, there's no way that I would say that that is an oolong tea. So surprisingly, there's a little bit more sweetness in this tea than expected when compared to other styles of dark teas or ripe pu'ers, which is quite nice. And maybe that's the contribution of the Buddha's palm oolong, to this tea. Like that kind of sweetness that I tasted in the Buddha's palm before. I think some of that has carried over to the fermented version because there is a bit more of a sweet finish to this tea when compared to other styles of dark tea, that I've tried in the past, and which is quite that makes it quite nice. It's quite pleasant. There's a bit of that kind of like a kind of almost red date-like sweetness, slight sourness in the back of the tongue, like that kind of that tartness that's in the finish of this, which is quite nice, and it's not something that I would usually find in a dark tea or in a ripe pu'er. Yeah, so in terms of the aroma of the leaves, it's got this like kind of musty sort of smell, which, to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of when it comes to dark teas or kind of ripe pu'ers. I don't really like that aroma in the leaves, but thankfully, in terms of like the actual flavor of the tea, it's only kind of hinted at, and there's a lot more going on in the flavor of the tea, which makes it a much more enjoyable experience. Like, as I said, aside from that sort of earthiness and that kind of slight woodiness that you would expect from a dark tea, there is that kind of sweet finish to this tea, but also a hint of tartness and sourness at the back of the tongue, which does actually make it a very, very interesting tea to taste. It's definitely one of the more interesting teas that we've come across, and the whole experiment of taking oolong tea and then fermenting it into a dark tea was definitely a kind of interesting concept for us to explore. Is it one of my new favorite teas? Probably not. I mean, just having tried it and having drunk it over the last couple of weeks, it's still not enough to kind of depose where ripe pu'ers sit for me. If I'm looking for something that's kind of earthy, that sort of warm, that sort of warm, comforting, relaxing sort of tea, I'm still going to gravitate most likely towards a ripe pu'er of some sort. Maybe it's because I've been drinking ripe pu'ers for a lot longer than I have this particular tea, and what can I say? Old habits die hard. I've developed a taste for ripe pu'er, and it's going to be pretty hard to come in with another kind of dark tea to sort of take over that spot. Is it better than the traditional Fu Zhuan, dark tea? I don't know if it's better or worse, but it's definitely different. I can kind of see a place for both teas depending on, I guess, your general mood. And I guess that's the case with a lot of teas, right? It's not necessarily better or worse. It's just, do you have a spot, in your life for this tea, depending on your mood, depending on how you're feeling. But yeah, Jinhua Xiangyuan, an interesting tea, a tasty tea that was definitely interesting to explore. So that's the end of our video today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. So members of the Tea Discovery Club, have you had a chance to try these teas out yet? Did you prefer the oolong version or the dark fermented style of this tea, or neither? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And to everyone else, have you had a chance to try Fu Zhuan or other styles of dark teas other than ripe pu'ers? What did you think? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!